So what can you show me that my heart don't know already? We make our own sense. You're qualified in me. What can you show me that my heart don't know already? We make our own sense, and you're qualified in me.
Okay. It is time for episode 3B of Life in the Box. I'm your host, Chris Cochran, and this is your podcast for automotive, finance, and insurance professionals. In the first episode of this series, we talked with Tom Wilson, and he told us how he felt about the idea of combining sales and finance into one role. Today, we hear the other side of the story from a gentleman who's been working in a store that implements that very process. His name is Jake Baer. Jake is currently working as a sales and finance advisor for Auto City in El Cajon, California. Jake has been in the business since 2010 when he worked for an independent store called Car 1234. Jake reached out to Auto City once he felt he was ready to grow and landed an interview and a job a short time later. Auto City runs a cradle-to-the-grave operation where the salesperson handles the transaction from start to finish, but I'm going to let Jake tell us more about the details of the operation. Everybody please welcome Jake Baer to Life in the Box.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm definitely excited to be here. Thank you to Dan Mason as well for reaching out to me on this specific topic, since it was actually brought up in a closed group on Facebook.
If you could, would you, before we get started with the interview, do you mind just kind of giving us a synopsis of how you got into the business?
Well, yeah, I stumbled upon it kind of by accident, like most of us did. I drove in with an old Ford Escort trade-in to a place, and it was like a 30-car operation probably at the time that I drove in. Started looking on the guy's website and actually just decided to say, hey, your website looks like I need some help. He said, well, you want a job? Anyways, long story short, I started doing the pictures for his cars and the descriptions for his website, and also posting to AutoTrader and Cars.com. And this was back in 2010. I was 19, maybe about to turn 20 years old when I first started, and I was doing just the web design and posting the cars online with the descriptions. But it started to get a little busy around there, and he decided to just have me sell cars too. It was not a huge amount of staff members there, kind of a smaller dealership. So I did about 2.5 to maybe almost 3 years with that company. I basically turned into the acting owner. The owner himself was very busy with car auctions and things like that, like owners tend to be. And I was just doing, 7 days a week, just ridiculous hours, doing everything for the guy, from price tags to the phone pops to the funding, all of it. So one day I'm searching online with a customer to show the customers that our vehicle is fairly priced, or the lowest price within 200 miles even, and it has a clean title and so on and so forth. So this company kept on popping up whenever I would go on the search, called Auto City. And I would tell my customer, oh, don't worry, it's probably going to be a salvage title. So I'd run the Carfax on it, I'd pull it up, and it'd be a one owner, perfect clean Carfax and everything. So I'd be stumped. They had a cheaper unit than us, and it was we were a pretty low price store there, and we did a little bit of haggling there, but not too much really. He priced his cars pretty much to sell, because the power of the internet these days really gives the customer the advantage when it comes to finding a good price and a good deal. So I'm at Auto City now, of course. That's why I'm here. I replied to a post about the cradle-to-grave stores, and Auto City is one of those stores. They always have been, at least since I've been there in the 2 years. They've always been a firm price store since they've been open. And since I've been working for them, they had the hybrid system, or the cradle-to-grave system, so it's called. And that's been in place since I've worked there.
How long has Auto City been in business?
I believe it's about 9 or 10 years now. It's going to be that they've officially been in business. The current location is, I think, 6 years.
And how long have you worked for them?
I worked for them total for a little over 2 years.
If you could, since you're one of the few people that was willing to come on and talk about running a process cradle to the grave, start to finish, can you just give us the rundown on how the process works from when the customer comes into the dealership and meets with you for the first time, almost like a general step-by-step until they're out the door and delivered in the vehicle?
Definitely, because there's two ways that happens, Chris. It's either I get a phone pop and I answer the phone and, set the appointment with them over the phone, and they show up. And, they either ask for me or I already know they're on their way and I have the car ready for them usually. They'll show up. I will go over the car with them, ask them, if they've already seen the advertisement for it, online, make sure they've already seen the Carfax for the vehicle as well. It's really a similar business model to CarMax. So here, I'm doing the whole thing. So say I took the phone pop and my client shows up, I have the car ready for them. They're going to test drive the car. I'm going to even maybe give them an option to, if they want to take the car out to maybe their mechanic, maybe back to their family to have somebody check it out, or just so we're a very relaxed, low pressure store. We actually have a low pressure policy. I let customers go out and shop the competition all day long. In our case, it actually helps us. We have a transparency business model. I'll turn my screen to the customer at appropriate times, never at inappropriate times, like when it's a bureau or something like that. I always stay in compliance, but I have no problem showing a customer, the actual deal structure before I'm going to print out their paperwork and go over each product that I already presented them with them and make it clear to them, what they're buying, how it changes their monthly payment, the benefit that the product has for them. And the interesting thing about this cradle to grave operation is that a lot of these customers, and you'll notice Dan Mason, who chose this topic and who actually reached out to me, he doesn't do his interview. The whole topic was about an interview for your last podcast. And to quote Dan Mason, I believe he said, these salespeople, they have days, months, weeks, even years to build that rapport. That rapport is really all you're looking for. We need to break down those walls. Just like Dan said, we're all dealing with the same objections out here, regardless of if you're cradle to grave or if you've been in the finance box for 30 years, you're still going to hear, oh, my brother's a mechanic, or you're still going to hear, oh, my car's not going to depreciate that fast. You're still going to get these same objections. So, in the long run, we're all dealing with the same thing. And it's a customer's market, and the customers are only getting smarter with technology. And I think that if customers had a choice, they'd probably like to buy a car without even having to deal with a salesperson, just because of the stigma that's associated with us in the first place.
That's actually interesting that you say it that way, because a lot of the times when we hear talk about combining sales and finance, the idea and the thought behind it is getting rid of the finance manager, not getting rid of the salesperson. And the way you just explained it, it almost feels as though customers would rather get rid of the salesperson and go directly to the finance manager.
You talk about eliminating the salesperson, you're definitely going to have that, especially if you have somebody, we work with Prestige and they do open bankruptcy deals, people with open bankruptcies don't want to go around parading and telling every salesperson on the floor that they have an open bankruptcy, so the people that are having a tough time getting approved would definitely like to eliminate a salesperson just to get straight to a finance manager. But in some other cases, you have the people with perfect credit that don't really care about, what their rate's going to be. They're probably either cash buyers or they're pre-approved with USAA and they've been with them for 30 years, and.
Well, let me ask you this. What is the time it takes from the customer coming in to start looking at vehicles to the time they leave with their new car? What's the average time it takes for a customer to buy a car in your dealership?
So it's definitely a case-by-case basis, of course, but it all depends on how that customer is. I have people that literally will walk right into my door with an ad from my website printed out, walk up to my desk and drop it on there and just say, hey, I want this car. My mom and sister and my friend already bought their car here. I know how you guys work. Get it ready for me. I don't even want to test drive it. Let's get the paperwork started.
How long until they're driving?
30 minutes, man. I'm quick with the paperwork.
So 30 minutes, the customer walks in the showroom and tells you what car they want. In 30 minutes, they're driving the car out.
Yes, sir. I'll have every document printed out for them. Well, we're talking about a cash buyer, I clear them with the OFAC questions. I don't know if you have to do that out there, but here, even with the cash buyer, you have to clear them with the OFAC questions. So say I get a cash buyer that walks in, they already know what car they want. They got the money right in their hand, or they got a check right in their hand, whatever. They come in, I clear them with the OFAC questions, typical stuff. Get the copy of the driver's license, make sure that he has full coverage on the car,
I would argue that in most, at least new car franchises, it takes 30 minutes for the salesperson just to enter the information into the CRM. before the deal even gets to finance, before the finance manager gets to review the paperwork, print the paperwork, sit with the customer, pitch any products, and sign them up.
We're going by like the best case scenario, right? So let's just say that, for example, this guy was a lead in my Dealer Socket also, because we use Dealer Socket as a CRM. So say I already had his information through Dealer Socket, I could post to DMS right through Dealer Socket, and I'll have no problem at that point, converting the information over, just right away. It comes right into my dealer track. So I already have his information. Plus, I'm going to make sure and verify with him that his name and address are correct, because that's how it's going to look on his title and his registration. As long as I make sure that his name and everything else matches up and that it really is him, and I clear the OFAC questions, and he is a cash buyer, I get out my paperwork and stuff like that, and I go over products with him. And 30 minutes is that's about the fastest that it goes. We're talking about a guy that comes in, say this guy, I don't know, he's a resistance customer. He's not going to buy any products. It's just he already came in, and say I already talked on the phone with him or something like that, and it was already agreed that he was getting the car, right? And he was buying it cash, and he was coming in, and he wasn't getting any extra products. And no matter what I told him, he told me to save my breath. He's one of those guys that just said that. Okay, so I already know this guy's coming just to buy this car cash. He's probably been referred by a friend or family member, because we actually track 30% repeat referral customers at this dealership. So he probably already knows how we operate, or he's looked us up already. It's not that hard I could even not have him in my CRM. I could just have him in DealerTrack and put his information in there fresh, make the event, have him clear the OFAC, and then once I accept the deal in DealerTrack, there'll be an event created in Dealer Socket as a sold event. It just won't have any notes in it. So I'll even have his information transferred right over as soon as that deal status is changed into accepted in DMS.
Now, how many people in your dealership will touch a deal, physically touch the deal paperwork, the deal jacket, from the time the customer walks in to the time that deal gets filed in a filing cabinet? How many people? Obviously, you're going to touch the deal. I'm assuming you have somebody that does your tag and title work that's going to touch the deal, maybe somebody in accounting. But how many people?
I mean, there's times that they could deal with me, a lot attendant, a mechanic that's doing an inspection on their trade-in. My general manager might come out and, do a greeting with them. My finance director, he's going to probably at least come out and congratulate them, but in some cases where either, the customer doesn't have time, like, the John Doe that I'm giving you the example of, that cash buyer guy that just comes in, wants his paperwork printed out and to be in and out. If he so prefers to only deal with me for the whole thing, that whole interaction that we have will just be handled with me. He won't get a greeting from anybody. He might get a greeting, but he doesn't have to talk to a single other salesperson. But as soon as I'm finished with my paperwork, that's when we have an internal auditor. Basically, she's an office manager. You're not going to get a single document by. She will make sure that every single document that is legally required for that car deal will be in there, and then some. We have our customers sign a copy of a Carfax, and we have our customers sign a copy of the MVITIS report, the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System check, that you can run that just shows that it's a clean title. It's never been branded out in any of the 50 states. We have them sign that as well at the time of the deal. We print out the recalls. If there's any open recalls on the car, I go to safecar.gov. I run the VIN number, and I check and make sure that, there's no recalls on the car. If there is an open recall on the car, then I get a recall sheet, a recall disclosure form, and I have the customer sign that. As soon as I'm done with my deal jacket and I've packaged it up and I've got my package ready for the bank and made all my copies of all my SIPs and everything that I needed to do, and I have my one package for the bank, that goes directly to my finance director's office, into his stack of package deals, and then the deal jacket goes into the office manager's office, and then her job is solely just to go over every single one of those deal jackets and make sure that everything is in proper order, so that, if an audit were to happen or something like that, everything is perfectly in line. So in that case, it can really be as little as one person that touches the actual customer itself, and two people, if you include my office manager, because she will also go to the commercial DMV to get the cars registered and get the titles as well. And so she would be in charge of that whole part of it.
If you were having this conversation with somebody who didn't think that you should combine sales and finance, there's a few objections that they would have to you. and I want to lay those out to you and kind of get your response to them. The first one would be capability, meaning a lot of people will say that a good majority of salespeople in dealerships nowadays don't have the ability to gather the knowledge, retain the knowledge it takes to not only learn about the vehicle, learn the steps to the sale, deliver the vehicle properly with building rapport with the customer, and then once that's all done, which in a franchise store can take 2 to 3 to 4 hours, and then turn around and do all the compliance paperwork, a menu presentation, and package a contract. So they're going to say that most salespeople don't have the ability to do this role. And not that that's a bad thing, but they just don't have it. So what are your thoughts on that? If there was somebody that was trying to implement this process in a new car franchise and they have 20 salespeople on the floor, what are they going to do with these salespeople? Because 18 of them aren't going to be able to handle finance.
Young people's minds are very easily, they soak up information like a sponge. We have this kid on our team. He came from, he was in the reserves. He was doing loss prevention for some department store before, and he just came in hungry, and he was a smart kid and he's good with people and he's only 21 years old, and he just came up, he did the right thing, when he needed help with a deal. You're asking, how can you get these salespeople right? Well, sometimes we have, one might come in and then they don't work out. We try it out and see if they can handle the process. For some people, it's just too much, and it is kind of a lot of work. You have a lot of stress. Not only are you dealing with the customer, but you're going to be dealing with the paperwork after and dealing with making sure that deal gets funded. Even though I have somebody, going over my paperwork and making sure that I'm staying in compliance, and a manager that's basically a compliance manager at our dealership that's just in charge of making sure that every salesperson there stays in compliance, I'm worried about making sure that my AmeriCredit deal is going to fund because, I've got child support stips and I've got, 3 months of bank statements and, I've got, a stack of stips that look like a Bible that I'm sending in because it's 2 separate accounts, one for the child support, one for the retirement, and then a part-time job on top of that, so I've got that alone and just POI, not to mention whatever else they're going to ask for, the references and all that other stuff, so you would think that the average salesperson couldn't do this. And I'll be honest with you, at Ford, the Ford store that I was at, and I'm not going to be specific to the store, and I really don't like bashing other places, but there was some really unintelligent salespeople there that pretty much a couple of them couldn't even really communicate very well with customers. But it's so easy to get on the front end of a deal at a franchise store. All you have to do is introduce yourself and shake their hand and then turn them to a closer, and you have yourself half a deal.
So you're touching on one thing that I had discussed with Tom Wilson in episode 3A when we talked about this. And what I had said to him was if dealers are going to go to this, if they're going to try to go to this process, they're going to have to be much more selective in their hiring. They're not going to be able to just pull somebody coming in out of high school and fresh out of college without a real true interview and any really qualifications and throw them out on the sales floor and say, let's see if they can sell cars. So that's one of the things that if a dealership is going to try to implement this process, they're going to have to be very, very specific in who they're hiring and much more detailed in their hiring process. To get people that can actually handle the amount of work, the workflow that's going to come from combining the two processes. Now, the other thing that I wanted to ask you, you've probably heard the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none," and I wonder if combining the processes lends us to that idea of I'm pretty good at selling cars and I'm pretty good at finance, but I'm not really good at either one of them. And I guess if you had to put yourself in the position to be the absolute best finance manager, do you think that having to deal with the first hour and a half of the process, selling the car and, showing a vehicle and showing a couple vehicles and test driving the cars and doing all of that, do you think that takes away from your ability to be a very, very good finance manager? And does being an okay finance manager and having to do all the back-end paperwork and submit deals to the bank and chase the steps keep you from being a very, very good salesperson?
I think that's a very good argument, and probably the only argument that will really be able to stand in place for the old schoolers that are arguing against this cradle to grave, besides the compliance, of course. And we went over that selective hiring will, easily weed out the, ones that can't handle it. And, you'd be surprised how quick people can learn things. Everybody gets hung up on, oh, we're selling people these things, and oh, we're doing this. That's not the truth. The truth is that we are customer service experts. We are people. We're people persons. We are the type that what makes somebody great, in whether it's on the sales floor or in the finance office, is them being good with people and good with communicating. People can learn. As long as you're smart enough to learn, then the rest of it all comes down to your interaction with the customer and getting that customer to like you, getting them to laugh. How important is that? That's brought up by every trainer that you have out there that's trying to tell you how to sell cars and get better penetrations on one, no matter what it is. The more common ground that you can establish with the customer, the more you can make them laugh, the more you can make them feel like you're a real human being and not this, stigmatized scumbag used car salesman that they think that you are, is what's going to make you great in the business, or that's really what's going to make somebody shine. And I think it's pretty obvious, and like I said, the sales managers listening will know that they have those people at their dealership that, when they're on, and they are great for that reason, that they're on, that's just how they are. We have certain people in this business that are just better than others, and it comes naturally. And I think that life is sales in the long run. I mean, how much have you learned just about, relationships with your friends, families, girlfriends, whatever, just off of the amount of people that you've dealt with in selling cars, it applies to all of life. So in the long run, we're talking about being great at, selling Gap or selling a vehicle service contract, or selling tire and wheel and key replacement, being great at that, you have to be great at people before you can be great at that, because really we're dealing with people at the end of the day. So what it's going to come down to, and what I'm going to argue with about that, is saying, yeah, sure, you have paperwork and stuff to learn, but I know exactly. I could probably recite it backwards in order from, when I grab my forms, I walk into the back office that has all the legal forms in it. And, I grab them all one by one. They're all written right there. ROS 262, the bill of sale. I've got the, credit application. I've got a condition of delivery form, I've got agreement to furnish insurance policy. I got my due bill. I got, I could go on, and it's just, to me, it's become so easy by now, and I really think that all it takes is one, it's just a smart person to be able to package a deal a couple times and feel confident, and be in an environment where they're encouraged, and not, it's all about, I feel like a lot of these old schoolers and these managers are, these guys that are afraid of this system, and I'm saying they're afraid of it for a good reason, because they don't want to switch, is because they it's going to be more work for them. They feel like, almost, trying to figure out a way to do it, and they're wondering, is it going to be successful?
Jake, we've covered a lot of really good information here. I mean, I appreciate your point of view and you sharing with us kind of how your store does the process and why you feel it works. I'm sure people will have questions. Maybe some people want to argue a little bit with you, and I'm sure you don't mind that. But if you could, would you mind giving us a little bit of information as far as how somebody can get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out and ask you more about what it is that you're actually doing?
Most definitely, Chris. I will go as far as to put my direct cell phone number out there for anybody that wants to call or text me on my cell phone. It's going to be 619-715-5810. And my email address is jake@autocitysd.com. That's SD like San Diego. So my email, jake@autocitysd.com. Or just call or text me on my phone, 619-715-5810.
Excellent, man. I appreciate you being here. You've given us a lot of good information.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. First and foremost, like I said, I wanted to thank you for, choosing me to be on here. It's an honor having Dan Mason reach out to me personally on Facebook Messenger, and, connecting me with you. Thanks to Dan Mason as well, really excited for this. a great idea, and it's really going to spread a lot of knowledge, and it's going to be a really strong tool for us, the people in the automotive industry that have topics like this to discuss. So yeah, by all means, if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns whatsoever, please get in touch with me. This is what I do for my thrills, my kicks, and my career. So
excellent. Thanks again, Jake. Well, there you have it. Now, before you shut this podcast off, I do want to let you know that Jake and I had some extensive conversation after recording this episode. We talked a little bit about what it takes to actually implement this process, and when we discussed new car franchises, we both came to an agreement that it was unlikely that in most new car franchises, a process like this would work because of all the extra work that goes into delivering a new car, all the extra information that salespeople need to know, all the extra steps they have to take in regards to a delivery. It just doesn't make sense. We also talked about the jack of all trades, master of none statement that I had made earlier in the podcast, and how a great salesperson and a great finance manager individually will create so much more than an average or slightly above average person doing both. So while he works a process at a store, a used car one price store that works the cradle to the grave, and it works for them, the idea of combining sales and finance across the board in this industry is far from the best way to solve the problems this industry has. With that said, going forward, these podcasts you'll find are going to be much shorter. We'll probably try to make them under 10 minutes, preferably around 5 minutes. Really just narrowing down on the opinions of people on specific subjects. So on episode 4, I remind you that we're going to talk about the electronic menu and how it affects the F&I process, if it affects it at all. I may just address that one myself. I appreciate everybody who supported this podcast and who's been listening. If you could share this with other automotive professionals, let's get the word out about the Life in the Box podcast. I really appreciate all the support. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at lifeinthebox33. You can also reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and my direct email is chris@themcdavidgroup.com, chris@themcdavidgroup.com. Reach out to me with any questions, concerns, suggestions. I appreciate any and all feedback. To all my boxers, crush it, and thank you for listening to Life in the Box.